your experiences from South Africa and from Australia up until you got pregnant, how much of that was you saying that, okay, I'm pregnant. I need to figure this out despite what I've gone through because I want to make sure that not only is my life healthy, but the life of the child I'm bringing into this world.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was so what I often say, and my daughter always smiles now when I say it, but I often say that my child saved me because I was pregnant. I'd gone through this breakup. I'd also been through lots of difficult times from the time in South Africa to, adjusting to Australia. And one of the things I knew, because I found out, I intuitively had this feeling I was going to have a girl. But then when I was going through that time where I almost lost the baby, they were taking scans and things, and the sonographer said to me, I can see the sex. Do you want to know what it is? And I said, I think it's a girl. And she says, yes, it is a girl. So I knew I was bringing a daughter into the world. And I don't know, there was a resolve in me. From the moment I found out I was bringing a daughter into the world, there was a resolve in me that said, I'm going to give this girl a good life. And one of the ways I'm going to give her a good life is that I'm going to make my life good, because I needed to be an example to her. Because, sometimes we have parents or people around us, they tell us what to do, but they don't live it. And I knew from me growing up and watching my parents, I always watched my parents and how they were. And so I was like, no, I need to be an example to my daughter as well. So I can't just say I want to create a good life and then not have a good life. I actually have to make sure that that's happening for me and for her. And so once I gave birth to her, I became incredibly resolved to give her a better life. And that was the start of me starting to look for better opportunities. And it actually led to my side business, which is now my full-time business, because I sat down, I did the numbers, and I was like, man, there's this $50,000 debt. There's this newborn baby, and I'm not earning enough money, right? I did all my numbers, and I'm like, I'm not earning enough money. What do I do? So I calculated, I'm like, I need to earn $20,000 more a year. How am I going to do that? And I didn't know how to do that. But what I did do was I sat down and I said, okay, who can help me with that? Who can help me figure out how to get 20 grand more a year? And the first thing that came to mind was the people that make the decisions, the people that give people jobs. So I was like, well, that's recruiters, or that's hiring people in companies. And so what I did was I started to take these people out for coffee. I would save my little dollars, the little money I could save, I would save it. I would have enough money for, say, 3 coffees that week. I would reach out to a recruiter or reach out to a hiring person and would ask them out for coffee and say, can I have some questions? And most people, I think if you really ask people with sincerity and genuineness and authenticity, people will respond to you. And I was very upfront. I said, I need to learn a few things and I would like to pick your brain. And I think most people like people to pick their brain. We all like to share knowledge with other people. So most of them, I would say 90% of the recruiters or the hiring people I asked out for coffee said yes. And I asked them questions. And they told me specifically what I needed to do with my resume, what I needed to do to get better, how I needed to prepare for interviews, all this type of thing they shared with me. And I did that and eventually landed the opportunity. And the opportunity that I landed that gave me the next level with income increased my income by $50,000. And that shocked me because I was going for 20. So I more than doubled my target income. But what happened was that people around me, my family, my colleagues, friends, they knew the rock bottom that I'd hit. They knew I'd lost everything. And then 8 months later, they see me in this job that's paying me this really good money. And I'm starting to pay down all my debt, and that people started to come to me for help. And that's actually how my career coaching business was born, because I started to help people with the same strategies I had used to land my good job. But yeah, at the end of the day, at the bottom line of that story example that I just shared was that it was my daughter motivating me to have and create a better life. I did not want her to be a victim of life. I did not want her to know some of the struggle that I had known. Now, I knew that she would probably face her own challenges. None of us go through life without challenge. But I was like, I'm going to give her a really good start. And that's what happened. It was driven by past struggles, but also a desire for future success. Those were the two motivating factors that took me down the road I went.
So now, Wendy, when you look back on how far you've come and now you're helping other people to achieve some of the success that you did, what are some of the obstacles that you see them struggle with, which may remind you of what you struggled with back then?
So one of the things that I struggled with, and I see everyone who comes to me struggle with, is confidence, right? When you've been battered by life, whether it's an abusive relationship like mine was, or infidelity and your relationship ends, or you're now stepping into single parenthood, when you've been battered by life, it does dent your confidence. That is for sure. I think anybody who says it doesn't is a liar, right? so, so I'm just going to be upfront and put that on the table. Sometimes it's not necessary life. Sometimes you've been in a job for a long time and you're not getting opportunities, you're being overlooked. You could even have a terrible boss who belittles you, that can dent confidence. So whenever people come to me, and it was the same for me when I started out, the confidence was definitely missing. So one of the things that I started to look at was, what am I good at? Like, what are the things, can I name 3 or 5 things that I know I'm good at? And then, which of those 3 or 5 things do I really like to do? Is there one thing that in particular that I really like to do? Or are there 2 things, maybe 3 things? And then the third piece is, how can I start to shape up and frame up these skills that I have, that I'm good at, that I really love doing, and actually create a transferable skills list that could potentially go and help others. I can use in any industry, for example. So for me, if I use myself an example, I was very good with the written word. I was from the time I was a child. That was actually how I processed all that difficult times living in South Africa. I used to write about it. I wrote poetry about it. I wrote short stories about it. So the written word helped me, and I became very good at the written word. Written communication in particular, is one of my strengths. So I was like, I really love writing. I'm really good at writing. And then I looked at the jobs that I'd done earlier, and I was like, every time I'm in a company, somehow my bosses always give me the written stuff to do. If it's a PowerPoint presentation, whether it's emails. I've had a couple of bosses who were from other countries and struggled with the English language. They always used to let me write their communications because they knew I had this way with words. I was like, I like doing this. And then the other thing I identified was that I was always in places where I wanted to help people. So when I was a kid, I was working with disabled children. Then I worked in homeless shelters. So I was like, okay, there's another thread through my life. And this is where you start to build the confidence in yourself. When you start to look at what you're skilled at and what you're good at and where you've contributed something. And that's the piece I always say to people. When you're struggling, go and take a little trip down your own memory lane and start to identify the good skills, the skills that you love, and where you've contributed, because eventually you're going to be able to identify a pattern about the direction that you should be heading in.